The average American is struggling more than ever, and no one is talking about it.
Well, some Americans are feeling squeezed.
Half of Americans don't have enough savings to cover a $1,000 emergency expense.
Rents are skyrocketing, prices are up, and wages, they have not kept up.
So many Americans saying the rent is just too gosh darn high.
Rent is on the rise in cities across the country.
Wages have remained virtually unchanged over the last 50 years, with workers today earning just 12 cents more than they did in 1972.
And now more people than ever are depending on the government for survival. Let me put this into perspective. As of 2024, half of all Americans renting are struggling to make their rent payments. People are spending 30% of their income to afford rent, and in many cases, more than that, with the average payment being $2,029 per month.
Housing is now unaffordable for a record half of U.S. renters.
My rent just skyrocketed and I can't afford it, so I have less than 30 days to move.
Rental prices are unaffordable for a record number of Americans, with half of all renters paying more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities.
This does not take into consideration utilities, internet, basic water and power. And credit card debt just hit a record high of $1.2 trillion. The average American holds over $6,000 in credit card debt.
In recent years, the United States has witnessed a staggering rise in credit card debt.
Credit card debt is at the all-time high. It's never been like this.
People are using buy now, pay later services for groceries. Think about buying lettuce and milk and eggs on a finance plan.
It is not your imagination. You are paying more for goods and services than you were a year ago.
The cost of living for the everyday American and how much we pay at places like the grocery store here is a major concern for the everyday American.
Food prices are heading in the wrong direction. Prices jumped 15% in January and are up a whopping 170% since 2019.
1 in 3 Americans, over 100 million Americans, rely on the government for financial assistance. The system is shifting and the economy is changing. And the government, they're stepping in again, just like they did in 2020. Back then, everyone thought stimulus checks were a once-in-a-lifetime event. Well, all that's coming back and much more. Back then, they had eviction moratoriums, offering rent relief to tenants. Fast forward today, the government assistance programs have only gotten bigger.
Motion to protect residents from the threat of eviction and rent hikes during the wildfire emergency. The legislation calls for a moratorium on evictions.
From stimulus payments to rent relief to student loan forgiveness, from FHA and VA programs that paused and prohibited foreclosure notices on these loan products.
The government implemented what seemed like a lifeline, the mortgage moratorium. Millions of homeowners were told they could pause their payments, take a breather, and figure things out later.
Veterans at risk of losing their homes to foreclosure are getting more time to figure things out.
The government kept stepping in because more Americans were falling behind. And now they are expanding Section 8, putting more money into subsidized rent programs. Sounds great, right? But let's ask the real question. Is this just a short-term and temporary fix, or is there a much bigger plan in motion? Because here's where it gets even crazier. Companies are cutting jobs at record levels. AI and automation, they're replacing human workers.
There will be fewer and fewer jobs that a robot cannot do better.
There's already been several mass layoffs announced at companies.
And even Elon Musk has warned of a universal high income. Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg, many billionaires have said a universal basic income is the future in America.
I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income.
Figure out some way to develop some sort of a universal basic income plan.
Let's look at the facts. 75,000 federal workers took the buyout, and thousands of others were simply laid off.
Here at home, the Trump administration sending shockwaves through the federal workforce.
This could affect as many as 216,000 probationary employees.
Retail stores, banks, corporate offices, they were reducing headcount as much as possible. And AI and automation is going to see that only continues as warehouses get completely overhauled in the coming years. Amazon alone has now 750,000 robots in their facilities.
Amazon has undergone a remarkable transformation, deploying an impressive fleet of over 750,000 robots.
It boasts a workforce of over 750,000 robots,
reducing the need for human workers and to expedite deliveries and packaging. And Elon Musk himself said the government will have no choice but to give direct financial assistance to the American people.
I don't think we're going to have a choice.
So when you see the government expanding Section 8 housing, understand that this is not just about rent. It's about a growing trend and a future coming soon to America where millions of more households will need financial assistance and Section 8 vouchers for basic living accommodations. And Congress, they just approved more funding for Section 8. A few weeks ago, many people were talking about a big pause, cancellations even, reductions in vouchers being available.
Housing Authority has stopped accepting new applications for the Section 8 voucher program, which subsidizes rent for tens of thousands of tenants in the city.
The complete opposite has actually unfolded. They're expanding rent vouchers. Well, let's be real. This isn't about generosity. It's about control. The demand, it's skyrocketing. Nearly 50% of Americans can't comfortably afford rent.
For the first time ever, rent is unaffordable for half of all U.S. renters.
Evictions are rising, delinquencies are up. More people are turning to government programs just to survive. And as these problems get worse, more landlords will turn to a safer solution, which is guaranteed rent checks from the federal government via Section 8 and housing vouchers. Section 8 isn't about free housing. It's a system that has been designed where tenants will receive a portion or all of their rent paid for by the federal government, depending on how economically disadvantaged that household is. So if the tenant is in a very bad situation, there's a good chance the government will pay 90 to 100% of rent. And if their situation isn't so bad, maybe they'll pay 50, 60, or 70%, or maybe 75% of gross monthly rent. Sounds like a win-win, right? But here's the catch. Demand is insane. And with all these problems that America is now walking into, the demand's only going to continue to grow. There are millions of Americans sitting on a waiting list to get housing vouchers so they can have a safe and affordable place to live. In the past, the main bottleneck was funding. There just simply wasn't enough money. And now, with rent prices soaring and the government stepping up even further, the program will get bigger and billions of more dollars will be sent directly to landlords offering housing through these Section 8 programs. But here's something interesting. Section 8's expanding, but who's going to make the real money off of this? I look at the biggest homeowner in America, Pretium Partners. They own 97,000 single-family homes, and they just launched a real estate fund exclusively to Section 8 and housing voucher participants with 2,500 homes to start. Why? Because they know what is coming. Government-backed rent is a guaranteed check from the federal government. The rent is paid no matter what. And when the government is throwing money at something, many times the smart money will follow. So while most people struggle to afford a place to live, the biggest real estate investors in America are striking gold on this major shift. In 2024, the US government spent $6.8 trillion on Social Security, Medicare, defense, and other objectives, and only generated $4.9 trillion in revenue, creating a $1.5 trillion deficit. And the reality, the US government and the American people are already in debt by $36 trillion.
U.S. government debt is now the highest in history.
Not to mention unfunded liabilities. Some estimate that number to be 150 to 175 trillion. Inflation is still rising. Now they're adding more spending on top of that. So what happens next? Will taxes skyrocket? Will inflation spiral out of control? Or is this just the first step to a universal basic income system? Because once the government starts handing out money, they do not stop. As the saying goes, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. I saw this shift happening a while ago. That's why I sold my place in Delray Beach, Florida, and relocated my entire family to Ohio. I began investing in Section 8 properties here because no matter what happens, the affordability crisis is going to get worse. People are going to be relocating to find an affordable place to live, and the government is going to offer more and more and more assistance to tenants. And these landlords are going to be the beneficiaries of all of this assistance. And if this is the future, it only makes sense to get in front of where the money is going to start to flow. Now, as these government programs begin to get expanded around Section 8 housing vouchers, and they offer more and more money to fill these units, they'll offer 10 or 15% above market rate to fill these properties. And so when you have the government throwing billions and billions of dollars into these programs, what's ultimately happening is they're competing with market rate tenants. So they're going to continue to push the rents higher and higher and higher. As that's happening, the job market is changing and inflation's getting out of control. The everyday tenant is going to have a harder time to be able to afford a place to live. And so what's going to really happen here? The demand for government assistance is only going to grow in the coming 3 to 5 years. The smart investors and landlords are getting in front of this trend, and they're going to capitalize on it. There's no surprise Pretium Partners is getting involved in this, and a lot of these other really big real estate companies are getting involved in single-family Section 8 housing because it's the future. When you buy a house for 60, 80, 100, 120 grand, and you could rent it out for $1,400, $1,600, $1,800, where else are you going to get those types of returns? Now, I'm not paying $120,000 for a house. The most expensive home I purchased, and one of my investors have purchased, was actually a property that I bought for $92,000. Our average is about 80 grand. We're not buying in dangerous neighborhoods. These are safe, quiet, suburban neighborhoods. Most of everyone watching this channel has seen the neighborhoods that I'm walking around. These are quaint, nice communities where anywhere else in the country, these homes would be $500,000, $600,000, $800,000. Where else are you going to get this, right? So these investors, they're looking at what the government's doing. They're looking at this big strain on Americans' pockets, and they are going to capitalize on this affordability crisis. There's just no other way around it. So this is the future. Section 8 real estate is going to be, I think, the biggest opportunity for smart and savvy entrepreneurs and investors in the real estate space. What do you think about this entire situation? Where do you see Section 8 going? Do you think this is the best real estate play? I personally do. Let's have a conversation about this below. And if you'd like to learn more about what we are doing, you can go to singlefamilyinvestors.com if you have $100,000 in cash or more. Singlefamilyinvestors.com. How we work is we will help you find the property. You own the property 100% in your name. We oversee the construction. We assist you with placing the tenant, getting Section 8 approval. And you essentially serve as a silent owner. You don't deal with the tenant. We handle all the property management for you. And then you can collect your distributions. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to singlefamilyinvestors.com. Catch you next video.